And we are live with another episode of Unpublic, where we learn in peace, but we choose violence on some mornings. Today is Freedom Friday, and you are still not free, but hopefully you will be freer after this hour of conversation that we have. Today, we have a very esteemed guest at a moment in time when it couldn't be more perfect for us to have our expert that we have on today. We have Dr. Chris Emdin, who is an associate professor in the Department of Mathematics, Science, and Technology at Teachers College, Columbia. He's also the author of a book that I know you have already read. And it's, he's actually the author of more than one book, because some of our people like to keep writing and just write over and over again. And a forthcoming book that you probably don't know about already, which I'm on the pre-list for. But for those who want to teach in the hood, and some of the rest of y'all too, is a book that, you know, almost everybody has either encountered, read, said they read, lied about reading, skimmed, skimmed and got the main points out of, and then acted at a party like they knew what it says or whatnot.
I used to do that about TV shows back in the day. We weren't allowed to watch TV. So at recess, people were like, did you see this? Did you see that? Did you see good guys always wear black? And I was like, hustle for a little bit. Then I'm in the next circle. And then, you know, because we weren't able to watch none of that. You know what I mean? It was like Sesame Street and Roots. You know what I mean? Then go to the next one like, yo, you see that movie, bro? Like,
well, Dr. Emdin, welcome, brother. I appreciate you coming on this morning. Oh, he froze. This isn't Philly, is it? Is he in Philly? Because I get to talk about y'all cable.
Yo, the enemy won't let us be great, yo. But I'm glad to be on, man, and share space with you two brothers that I really, really love and respect and admire in many ways. So I'm hyped to just share space with you guys and build.
Well, listen, there's a couple of things that I think we should go in today. You know, we usually try to put things in the context of history and specifically Black educational history so that it can help inform the present, so that we know like what we're dealing with today. Fridays, we usually do that, but we want to go anywhere that our guests want to go because you have expertise that you bring to the table. And I always feel like we're living in a moment. So Sharif is the anchor on this show where he keeps a steady rudder. And I'm more of the man of the moment who's kind of like, man, the world's on fire right now. So this, like, what's on fire in my mind right now is people running up to state legislators and outlawing critical race theory.
Yeah.
That seem to come out of nowhere. And when I see things like that, you're exactly the type of person where I wonder, what do you think when you're watching this? Are you as alarmed as I am? Do you think it's the problem that I think it is? You know, what's your kind of take on it?
I'm not at all alarmed. And the reason why I'm not alarmed is because the notion of sort of blinding the world of the perspective of Black folks and robbing them of the opportunity to be able to articulate their lived realities has been a piece of education in the United States from the beginning of time. And I think what's happening now is like cats are they just like stumbled upon critical race theory and utilized it as a convenient scapegoat as a way to say, you know, this is the reason why we should not be allowing these folks to have a voice. But the assault on the voice of Black folks has been apparent. And the reason why I'm also not alarmed is cats are complaining about a theoretical framework without at all really focusing on how that plays out in real time. And I'm actually okay with folks critiquing a framework if they're not having conversations about pedagogies and how those get enacted. Because y'all gonna have conversations about theory all day long. I'm gonna do what I do. I do think there's some problematic themes around the contemporary assault on critical race theory, because it's almost like a newfound way to be able to articulate why Black freedom is problematic. But as far as the impact it has on what we do in schools and what we do in classrooms, I think it's all semantics, beloved. Like I can't get mad at somebody who's critiquing critical race theory if they can't articulate what critical race theory is.
And you're watching that they can't, right? You see right now they can't.
Like that's the whole new thing. Like if you like everybody is asking, so what are you exactly mad about? They'll take one excerpt from one line somewhere and that's obscure and erase it from the context. So like I can't get mad if them cats want to get sidetracked by theoretical framework. You go ahead and do that. Because meantime, I'll be doing what I do regardless.
And that's my take on it. With what you do. Like, you know, it feels like to me in articulating, your life's work is articulating a version of a pedagogy that's good for Black folks or Black children, right? So this doesn't imperil that at all. This doesn't imperil that. This doesn't change the game for what you're trying to push in terms of a Black pedagogy or a pedagogy of our own, I should say.
So here's the thing, because I don't want folks to misconstrue what I'm saying, because some, this has been my whole career. Folks are like, y'all heard Chris Emdin say he don't know about I'm not saying that I don't think the assault on critical race theory is problematic. I'm not saying that we should just allow folks to critique a framework that's opened up space for us to be able to, have a lens to talk about the racialized experience of Blackness in America. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if my enemy is preoccupied with a framework and that allows them to be distracted when I can do the work in classrooms, I'm good. Now, the intellectual conversation we could have, why exactly are you mad at critical race theory? How does that vary from other existing frameworks? Why is it that you've chosen to be able to assault that in this time, post-insurrection, post-George Floyd? Isn't this an extension of your trying to sort of usurp power and redistribute it in ways that erase it from having Black folks have it? All them things matter. But I'm hyped when folks get distracted by theory. You got to understand, when white folks get caught up in I really want to talk about the semantics around the difference between cultural relevance and cultural responsiveness in the context of, I'm like, keep going. I sit all day long in your little office talking about that. Because while y'all doing that, we're able to work with young folks. Like now I could get Science Genius going. Now we could do hip hop ed work. Now we could talk about Black history in schools. Now we could reimagine what Black science and technology and engineering and mathematics look like. So I'm like, matter of fact, keep it a buck with you. Sometimes I will throw out there and sprinkle a little provocative theoretical thing to get them cats caught up. And while y'all doing that, I'm in the hood doing what I do. And I think that, Black folks in education have to understand that it is part of the playbook of white folks to take a line, a strand, a simplistic rendition of a complex idea and then sit and wax poetic on it because they lack the intellectual sophistication to see where the intersections are of theory and pedagogy and practice and community and schools and life. So when you don't have the ability, listen, everybody who does not have the ability to understand the complexity of the lived experience of Black folks will get caught up in a thin slice of it for the sake of making them feel as though they have insight. This is why I'm always flabbergasted by folks who are interested in urban education and ain't been in nobody's classroom in 20 years. It's like you articulate the concepts around urban education, but you ain't been in the hood. So really, you're not really doing urban education. It's almost like an intellectual masturbation, right? Like you're trying to get yourself off on your theories, but you're not really about the work. And so
I just want you to know all of Idaho just logged off just now.
It is what it is, man. So that's just my stance, beloved. And again, I'm here for the theoretical conversation. I'm here for how it situates itself in a contemporary context. I'm here for delving into the deep details, as to the history of critical race theory and why it's so essential for the emancipation of Black folks, right? Without that framework, we lack the ability to be able to talk about why things are so jacked up for us, right? Critical race theory allows us to be able to look at the world through a racialized lens so that when we experience the effects of racism, we don't think it's us, right? Because a lot of folks are like, oh, it's y'all. You weren't able to do that. The kids ain't passing tests. And without that context and without that lens, we look at ourselves as though we are the reason for our own dysfunction. Critical race theory allows us to be able to understand, this is planned. This is within a larger context. This is historical. So it has value in that respect. I just think that there are limitations to its effects on what goes on in classrooms every day if we're thoughtful about how we cart out our map towards our freedom.
Sharif, I want to get you in here, but I have one more question. If you indulge me, just one more. So sometimes these type of incidents that come up have us jump out defending stuff that we would have never had to defend or want to defend the day before. So we have talked on the show about Derek Bell, about Black history and pedagogy, about strategy, Black strategies throughout time, different Black intellectual thought systems. We've covered a lot of that on the show. Critical race theory was always one of those ones in the wheelhouse. It wasn't the primary one, but it was one. But when people start attacking it, suddenly here I am out there like, oh no, I'm wearing a CRT t-shirt now. Yeah. Even though the day before, Derek Bell was many within a portfolio of Black folks that gave us a thought system to use. Before this all immersion came up, like I said earlier, you were already developing a pedagogy of our own, a Black pedagogy, or a way of thought, a thought system, a way of looking at life. Was CRT, before all this came up, primary, one of many? Was it, is it, the blueprint? How does it fit within your work?
For me personally, it was one of a number of tools that I held value for and pulled upon in different scenarios and contexts. You know what I mean? And fam, you just articulated it so perfectly, because not like now, because everybody want to assault it, it forces you to cap for it. And as I'll cape for it. And as you're caping fervently for it, it inhibits you from being able to do the deep intellectual work of the kind of frameworks that are needed for now. And I'm not saying critical race theory is passé. Don't get into it. And again, listen, I always have to have these disclaimers, because the nature of my career, like I'll say something about one person who runs a charter school that I find problematic. And they're like, Dr. Emdin hates charters. He said F charter. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so
that's me. That's me, just for the record, just if we're being transparent, that was me when you did it.
Like the nature of my career has been that, right? Like that's will misconstrue a perspective.
Right.
And I saw love it, like, because I know who you are and I know what you do. So I knew what that was and I ain't tripping. But so that's why I always have to give disclaimers. For me, CRT is essential, but it's not the chief means through which my work gets done. In fact, for me, I think theories must evolve with the times. You know what I mean? I think critical race theory was essential in the era where Brother Bell was articulating that need. And I think even this idea of critical race theory emerging out of law, because the sort of like the significant details within the law as a mechanism to assault is crazy. That was needed. Like for me though, I'm doing reality pedagogy, which in many ways. So here's the thing. I'm also a hip hop educator, right? Hip hop is a sampling culture. So I sample a little CRT. I'll sample a little Paulo Freire. I'll sample a little Pentecostal pedagogy. I'll sample and I will give credence to where the thoughts came from, but I utilize those as a way to make sense of a theory that helps me to be effective in the context in which I'm contemporarily embedded. And I'm not going to get so deeply wedded to a framework that it robs me of the vision to be able to get the tools at hand to make sense of what I need to get done. Like, these like I'm a firm believer in like a theoretical framework of gumbo. You know what I mean? Like a theoretical articulation that's of the bricolage. You know what I mean? Black folks made gumbo because like, listen, they ain't give us nothing. Oh, we had the scraps of this, the scraps of that, the scraps of that. Yo, we got to make a popping meal. So out of necessity, you pull from what you have at hand to create something that is more nutritious and delicious than any one single thing. You feel me? The bricoleurs in France, they were these poor cats who couldn't build these walls. They had glass, a little bit of cement, a little bit of rocks, a little bit of that, this and that. And they're like, yo, we can't build one wall like the other folks do. Yo, give us a little bit of everything. Put it all together and boom, it gets popping. Hip hop. Yo, you sample a little James Brown. Get a little drum, a little bass, a little 808. Create something magical. So I think for me, CRT was like it's like a James Brown sample.
I was about to say, as you were saying this, I was thinking to myself, so Derek Bell in this way is the James Brown sample, right?
That's it, beloved.
And you went through a few eras where I think you're on mute, Sharif. You might be on mute.
Oh, I was just saying, yeah. I was nervous you were about to say Lionel Richie, and I was holding on to my seat. I was like, please you need to leave
Lionel alone. Leave Lionel alone. But I love the way that you're phrasing this because it's a perfect analogy that helps me understand. It's like it gives me you went through a phase in a period where George Clinton and the James Brown sample were overused. No, they were in the beginning. They weren't overused. In the beginning, they were used. And then at some point they became overused and you had to move on to a new set of samples, right? And I would say today you probably have less of those. So Derek Bell fits within the sampling, but maybe as you develop reality pedagogy or whatnot, you have a different set of samples that are starting to make more sense now because time has moved on.
Absolutely. And as I produce new tracks, Sometimes
tracks.
it's like, oh, yo,
you don't produce diss tracks though.
Bring that joint back. So it's fundamental, and it's in the and sort of talk about it's in the cultural toolkit, utilized when needed, but not as a driver of all of it.
I love it. What do you think is Sharif?
Man, so many different things. I love it. So grateful, for to be here. And I was laughing when you're talking about like sometimes your words are, misinterpreted, because I'm cracking up because I'm like, yeah, I've heard say that school is trash and that system is trash. And y'all all trash, right? Like y'all need to do better by Black kids, right? And so I think this is an important time and moment, but it's all in the context of everything else, right? And like they're bringing this stuff up. And I think it's really important, as we always do, like connected to history, right? Connected to this ain't new, when we were talking about, what was it last week on Eight Black Hands, this idea of the Roots saying they ain't saying nothing new, right? This is an ongoing, strategy to mute the language that Black folks, tried to use to educate the children. And interesting enough, in Dr. Garvin's book, who was on the show before, one of the things he quoted somebody, I can't remember who he said, it may have been Dr. Woodson, that, the English language can't even capture, it's not even rich enough to capture the lives of Black folks.
Bro.
It's not even, who was it?
No, I'm just saying that was just it's such a beautiful sentiment.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say that, I'm an R&B head also. Maxwell had this song, right? I'm a big Maxwell fan.
And, we forgive you. Go ahead.
What are you talking about? Forgive you? What is wrong with you?
No, Maxwell is popping, beloved.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
I cannot say
what I mean? Like,
name the song, but
listen,
go ahead.
Yeah.
Maybe you, Matrimony, he got some joints, but he had this joint called Submerged, So We Become the Sun. And of course, he was talking about love. And he's talking about, somebody that he was in love with. And he said, words are demeaning. They can't describe. And that line always struck me. Like, because it's not like even like they're not the words. It's not even that they're not the words to describe something, but that words itself could not ever do that thing justice. Like words are demeaning. Like for me to try to utilize words to articulate the beauty of this person demeans the beauty of the person. And that's Black folks. Like the English language does not have the words to describe the beauty and complexity of Black folks. The Eurocentric imagination cannot capture the depth and nuance of the strut of a Black man when he first gets a fresh hairline. You know what I'm saying? Like there are no words to be able to fully grasp. Okay,
I'm gonna push back on you, Doc.
Come on now.
I'm gonna push back on you. And using your own knowledge, I'm gonna push back on you.
Okay.
What's the dopest lyrical set of bars you've ever heard in hip hop?
Ever?
Well, yeah, like, or just in general, like who you put in the top of lyrics where you heard and you thought, damn, that just cut through all of the sophistry of the world, right?
Some Nas stuff. Right now, my brother Loaded Lux, Harlem Stand Up.
Yeah. And the only reason I'm pointing it out, because their gift with the English language in describing the world that we live in and describing the circumstances that we have actually makes you stand up and cheer in certain points. You will hear a line and you will fall out. You would be like, oh, damn, I can't believe that, he's the equivalent of a James Baldwin over a beat track, right?
I agree with that.
See, that's the thing. That's Black folks bending. So when I listen to a Nas, for example, I listen to a Thought, for example, I listen to a Loaded Lux, for example, right? Like I'm saying that other cats can't put them words together in a way that our folks put them things together. And that's another level of sophistication for Black folks, right? It's not even like, because somebody could say the word. So I want everybody here, go watch Loaded Lux's freestyle on Funkmaster Flex. Just the way he walks in. Like, you know what I mean? Like the way, what's happening, handsome? Beloved, let's go. Like it's actually not even the words. It's the beauty of the space between the words. That's the magic. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I mean? It's the bending, it's the distortion of the traditional that makes it magical. Like, so when I say that words are demeaning, I think words are demeaning when articulated from a framework that attaches itself to institutional knowledge, right? Gotcha. And in intuitional knowledge. When words come through intuition, where there are iterations where it just flows in the contemporary, right? Like, when Loaded is like, what's happening, handsome? Harlem Stand Up. Like he ain't playing that. And it's in the emotion, the word movement, within the words that the words become. And only we can do that.
Yeah.
And I would say, and I agree with that. I like how you termed bending the language, because, you know, when you think about, like, my little brother, you know, he spent a lot of his childhood in Iran, and he used to write poetry. And, you know, and I would always say, like, yo, you never write poetry in English. And this is a 9-10-year-old man. And he would be like, English doesn't capture what I'm trying to say. Like, there are no words for that. It doesn't mean that you can't bend the English language, but he would literally say, like, no, my best poem has to be written in Farsi, because then I can fully express it differently, because of all of the multiple meanings of the words, the sophistication, the depth of a single word, and all the meanings that it manifests, right? And then when we take that and we just look at, okay, now in English, that creativity. And so my martial arts teacher, you know, I told both of y'all, you know, we didn't have gym, we had martial arts. And, you know, as our physical education, Baba Chang used to say, hey, if you're going to speak the truth, you got to be able to defend the truth. And part of what he used to talk about was, as an African people, we are polyrhythmic. We're not doing our katas or our forms and squares. We're not looking for one rhythm. Everything with us is poly. And I think that's how the dopest, you know, folks, when they bend the language, they have this poly framework that they move, that they dance with, right? They ain't doing square dancing.
That's right.
Right? And it applies to all of them.
I just want you to know every Black American did some square dancing at some point in public school.
So. It looked differently. I bet you it looked differently though.
It did.
What's good, bro? What's good?
It's all good, bro.
You good?
Yeah, I'm good, fam. I'm
good.
Yeah.
Nah, fam, you good.
Yo, I'm good, man. I'm good.
It's
for real. For real.
Exactly.
Exactly.
I think that's part of the lack of appreciation of Black folks, though, is our inventiveness throughout all time gave you the world. It gave you jazz. It gave you every art form afterwards. It even gave you country, country music, gave you blues. When you talk about bending the words, I mean, Jimi Hendrix and Prince bent notes in ways like when they play the guitar that inventive. I've seen several breakdowns of Prince solos where they have just talked about how he's talking through the music. He literally is he's not playing notes. He's not John Mayer. He's not John Mayer coldly hitting 3 notes at a time and then thinking he did something. He's literally talking through his guitar in ways people hadn't seen before, right? James Baldwin, for me, some of my best teachers were people like reading other folks or watching Prince, James Baldwin, even Grace Jones, these other people who did weird and crazy inventive things that made you think something else. You took it, remixed it for yourself in a whole different way, right? Wow. I see reality pedagogy that way, in that mixing and sampling the best of what we've had and creating new heritage with it is, to me, what Black people have always done. But we don't get credit.
And I would say, and we'd always done it even before enslavement interrupted, right? And so we can trace this back to the continent of the grounding and foundations of creation and sciences and math and language, right? And so, I think it's really important to always push and challenge that, hey, this started there, it got interrupted and we still found a way to resurface it in this new land and new space.
And also, to be clear, which is also really important, it's also some of the things that folks render to be superficial. They don't have the lens to see it in a deep way. A lot of people it's just I could see this artist. I could see the way that Jimmy did his thing with the notes. There's certain things that we flock towards because they're very in our faces to see its complexity. There's depth in things that we render simplistic. One of my homies, Ron Eglash, I love this dude. He's at the University of Michigan. Does a lot of work around ethnomathematics. And the way that he reveals the mathematical fractals in hair braids. What? You know what I mean? The way that he sees complex patterns in textiles. Right? You go to Nigeria and you look at the Ankara, the cloth, and the dyeing methods, and then the patterns over the dyeing methods. And then the triple layers of the dyeing methods. And you're I just thought it was cloth. Nah, it's and so I think, sometimes it's the beauty of our culture also is that we've been conditioned to perceive what we take for granted as simplistic, when in reality, if we took time to study what we thought was simple, we will realize a level of depth that so far is more complex than what other folks have given us as complex. And I think it's also that part. So for young folks, when I work with young people in classrooms, I always try to take a stop. I'm like, yo, by the way, like, do y'all know how dope you are? And they always like, Dr. E, here you go again. You just try to gas us up. I'm like, nah, stop. Well, do you know how dope you are? And it takes a while. But I'm like, yo, I'm just looking at your outfit, beloved. And like, you got a red check in your kicks that matches the brim in your cap and the stripe underneath your collar. Like, that's crazy to me how you can see the world through the lens of putting those colors. And they're like, I just do that. I'm like, nah, that's exactly the point. You just do this together, but you don't understand that what you just do together, it takes somebody 50 years in a traditional institution to go learn art and design and fashion to be able to just get a slice of what you just put together. And to be clear, they also watch you and what you render simplistic. And literally they have agents in communities observing cultural phenomena that emerge in Black communities so they could go back to France or Belgium or wherever else it is to mass produce what we do naturally and sell back to us. Like these people you don't know that this stuff you copying, you created. You know what I mean? And you don't even recognize that your gift is so far beyond them that by the time they catch up to what's popping in the hood 5 years ago, you already on to the next wave.
Moved on. Yeah.
And you say they trivialize what our output is, but they trivialize until they profit.
Yep.
Yeah, once the profits start rolling in, it's not trivial anymore. I mean, I'm old enough to remember people saying about hip hop, it's just talking over music. That's not going to be around for longer than 5 minutes. I literally remember people saying that. Like, this is, that's just talking over a record. That's never going to last. Who cares about that sort of thing? Radio wouldn't play it. Couldn't get anything played on radio. R&B people were the worst. R&B people were like, like, what is that? Street stuff. Like, we don't listen to that or whatnot. Next thing you know, you can turn a profit on it. It becomes real, right? Absolutely. Major companies.
And then also, as it gets real, you make a profit off of it. And as the young folks are creating new stuff, they're demeaning the new stuff until they can find ways to, develop the algorithm for it. This is a whole other conversation. Develop the algorithm for it. And then once they develop the algorithm for it, they'll make disposable what they thought was what had value until they construct an algorithm to sell back. Like, I want y'all to look at the evolution of drill music. So drill is like it's almost like a contemporary. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make it seem like
keep doing it.
No,
keep doing it. Yes,
we got an audience and everything.
Yeah,
but drill music, for example, which is like an offshoot of hip hop. It's hip hop, but there's a very particular sonic, like there's a sort of a sonic undertone that really muddles bass and then changes the pattern. Which is not, it's not like a Southern Atlanta, that like the pattern is it's a little bit more, I don't want to say sophistication, but it's a little bit more nuanced in the pattern with heavy bass. And then like Chicago drill, Keith and them were doing it at first. And then there was some cats out in the UK doing like UK.
Oh no.
Uh-oh, is that Philly internet?
This is probably East Coast. I'm fascinated by this.
I know.
I didn't know about the UK joint.
He's back. There he is.
The UK joint is crazy. It's crazy. And then Brooklyn took a hold of it. You know what New York do. You know what I mean? So Brooklyn took a hold of it and put a little I can't help it. I can't help myself.
Tell him.
You know what I mean? Baby. That Brooklyn drill is crazy. And they added these layers to it. Now here's what's fascinating. So now you've got this like UK, Brooklyn, Chicago drill that's across the globe. Then you got these cats in West Africa doing Afro beats, which has been taking like Fela Kuti kind of sonical vibes, and then taking like some contemporary R&B. Now you got Afro beats drill. I'm like, our people are so magical, and the kind of like sonic complexity in merging 7 or 8 genres from 7 or 8 different nations across the globe, and then constructing a new musical form that is equal parts hip hop and Afro beats with a drill undertone and like a Afro beats like Fela Kuti-esque 70s vibe at the same damn time. And you gonna tell me that we're not mathematical and scientific geniuses? How?
You know what, Doctor? I just want to tell you, the pyramids were built by space aliens. Just so you know, they just some
That's how the
aliens just came
doggone
down.
people found out about the
they just dropped them.
constellations.
Yeah. That's how they found about space and everything. ET just dropped right down, and ET was white, and he just dropped down out of the sky, just so you know. And he gave them so that's how you explain Mali and Timbuktu and Nubia and all that. You explain it by saying the aliens just dropped it right in, dropped it from the sky. Bro. And those aliens didn't come back ever again, which is weird. They only came once.
They only came once. And then black folks still creating dope ish, but it couldn't be them.
Yeah, no.
Right.
So what's the educational equivalent of all this that we talk about, like in black letters, black art, hip hop, in black style? All of this gets commodified and sold throughout the larger world. We focus on how much power we have within the education world, which seems to me to be very white, and the academy seems to be very white, and the methods and the processes and the publish or perish and the citations and just the structure, all of it seems to be a game of sorts, of which we're in somebody else's game. We're on somebody else's field. Is that true? Is that just me talking as a layperson, or?
Nah, it's true as far as the academic structure. The academic structure is created in a way that builds hierarchies, that give folks who have been successful within systems power, and dismisses those who they perceive to not have intelligence, right? And this is why, shameless plug, but this is why my new book is so important. I'm just about to
say it.
Nah, because look, because what I'm trying to do with Ratchetdemic, that's the title of the book, currently available on pre-order. What I'm trying to do with Ratchetdemic is say, okay, fine. The academic systems, higher ed, is white. It's Eurocentric. It's built on those traditions and norms. It gives those folks the ability to be able to hold power and wield power. And that's what it's constructed to do. Fine. We as black folks are ratchet. And by ratchet, I mean ratchet the weapon, because, New York slang, the ratchet is the hidden weapon. And in Southern slang, the ratchet is that expression of self that's perceived to be non-academic. And I think the way forward is for us to construct ratchetdemic identities. And ratchetdemic identities take on the recognition of the power that academic institutions hold, and then also censors and focuses on and gives credence to the ratchet ways of knowing and being of black folks and those who've historically been told that they're less than. And says that we could construct a ratchetdemic identity that infiltrates academic systems, blows them up, and reimagines how we engage. And so for me, technically, I'm an Ivy League professor. You know what I mean? I'm supposed to have Ivy League energy. I'm supposed to give you citations and quotes and references and points, and I'm not even supposed to talk like this. I'm supposed to talk like this. And so, as we engage, there's certain ways that being an intellectual, or
I hope you hear that, Ankrum.
Right, there's a particular way of engaging. I'm like, nah, fam, I'm from the hood, like I'm from the X, like, and I value my Bronxness and my hoodness and my ratchetness more than I value my academic self. And what I am now as a person who's an academic and intellectual who has a position, like I'm tenured, all that. Like, you can't take that shit from me. I made it. I earned it. I can now enter into the space holding my authentic identity and then reimagine what the norms are to let our folks in, because our folks already got the genius. They are the most intelligent people I've ever met. And I'm not trying to stunt real quick, but let me stunt real quick, right? I'm a professor at Columbia. I've been an alumni fellow at Harvard. I've worked with the Department of Energy. I've worked at the Obama White House. I've done some things. And I've met some smart, quote unquote, smart people. The smartest people, the more thoughtful, the ones with more complex and nuanced ways of understanding the world, the folks who can draw connections together, the folks who have been the smartest. And I've been everywhere with smart folks. The smartest folks I've met are in my hood. The most brilliant people I've ever met are the dude who was like, we was just in an Uber. And he was like, oh, by the way, what do you do? I'm like, I'm a science educator. Oh, science, what do you think about? And he's like, biomimicry as it relates to, I'm like, what? Let's talk. And so what I've come to understand is that credentials are not essential for constructing an intellectual self. They're simply a means through which folks can hold power. And a lot of folks who have credentials, all they've learned how to do is memorize somebody else's ideas. Yeah, but I asked academics, I'm like, so what do you think? well, Dewey said in 1967 that Vygotsky thought that Piaget had fathomed that. I'm like, yo, shut up. What do you think? I'm not saying don't reference those stuff, but like, what? There are a lot of folks with PhDs that have no original thought. Them cats ain't smarter than nobody in the hood because they come up with original thoughts all the time.
You just did it. You just did the damn thing. You just formed my T-shirt. There you go. Just formed my T-shirt. Sharif remembers my T-shirt that used to say, educated Negroes are killing us. And it was meant to be provocative. And I should tell people where that came from. When I was on a school board member, there was a brother that used to sit in the front row at school board meetings with a T-shirt that said educated Negroes are killing us. And I can remember going to him after one board meeting and saying, brother, we work together on all kinds of stuff. We work together all the time, blah, blah, blah. We're conspiring, we're doing things. But, you should say things in a way that people can understand it, blah, blah, blah. And I can guarantee you that was my first year on the board. By my second year on the board, I was wearing that damn T-shirt in my heart. I was like, yeah, bro, you should not change the thing. You shouldn't change a thing. You should say exactly what you're saying right now, and we should say it together. Sharif, jump in here, brother.
No, I mean, I just think this is why Black teachers are so important. I mean, these are the things like, yes, you go through these institutions and they're saying, do it this way. And like, this don't work. I had a principal colleague, Dr. C, you met Dr. C, right? And we'd be in these meetings together and sometimes, and she'd be like, what about this? And she's like, yo, Mikey, what's up? I'm like, we ain't doing that shit. You know what I mean? Just like, we ain't doing that. They all of the this and that and this and that. Like, you can't lead through Excel and you can't lead through certificates, right? Like, you have to bring something, right? And there are too many people that think they're leading a school and a district through some daggone Microsoft, construct. Like that's a tool. That's not a way of thinking. But they've made it into like, you're not dope unless you think in this, through this cell, through this row, through this column. And that's not what children are about. That's not what learning is about, right? Like people I've seen, like I've been to, so many different places. And I think, the beauty of going to a freedom school that was broke, right? Like had no money as far as like flashiness and things like that, but was so rich in how they, taught us, right? How they, just created this space where we loved Black people and that we loved it. I remember our art teacher drawing, just like imagine a first grader and you're learning how to draw the continent of Africa and you're struggling, you're doing it your own way. And your teacher saying, when you love this, you'll be able to draw it.
Wow.
Oof. And we're just like, we love it. Like, and you're that was the motivation to practice it. Like, this is your source.
Wow.
That's right. And like even just a teacher saying like, hey, what's this week's lesson? Oh, we're going to practice drawing Al-Cable line. What's Al-Cable line? That's Africa. That's another person's language for our place. Folks who live there call it Al-Cable line. And we're going to practice drawing it because this is our source of energy. This is our lineage. This, right? It was a whole different framework. I guarantee you. And we had teachers that went to Penn State, went to here, I guarantee you they did not learn that stuff from there. They learned it from the auntie and the grandma and from Carter G. Woodson Leonard. Like the intellectual genealogy has escaped from, it ain't in those spaces. It may be at some of the HBCUs, but more likely it's in the hood. It's at your grandma's feet. It's in the backyard of your uncles, right? Like, and so it's that kind of framework that's not taught in those other spaces that claim we're training y'all for kids. Right. And we talked about this before. How do you get prepared to teach Black children off of B.F. Skinner, Horace Mann, Dewey? How do you use that framework to go learn how to teach Black children? Like, to me, that is that's a sign of insanity and just like absolutely disconnect to what learning and teaching. I'm going to do a simple question. What's your intellectual genealogy? And then I can tell you if you're going to be successful with my child.
Yo, Brother Reef, like you just dropped the whole thing. That was so beautiful, bro. Like, and I don't think I could articulate that any better or more clear. That was just so, I just want to say that was magic, bro. And all I'll say after that is knowledge of self is the ultimate wealth. It is when we know who we are, from whom we came, the beauty and magic of those who are like our not just our like intellectual lineage, but our biological lineage. When we understand who we are as people, which is why I said earlier, like I tell the kids, like, yo, y'all are dope. They're like, yo, you don't know us. I'm like, I'm walking in here and seeing your blackness in this building, and I'm telling you that you are amazing. And when young folks' minds are blown when somebody affirms them, you know something's wrong. Because the marker of our success is when you say that to them and they say, yes, I am. And whenever a person is doubtful of the genius that they inherently are born with, you know there's work to do within that institution. Knowledge of self is the ultimate wealth. We become rich monetarily, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, when we know who we are and from whence we came.
I actually want to push on this point a little bit too, with something I know you'll have expertise on. I have questions about my talented 10th. I got questions for my smart people. So I've had in my intellectual journey or whatnot, I've read Black scholarship and leaders and try to digest it and say, okay, do I get this? Do I understand it? And I have ahas sometimes. Reading Vanessa Siddle Walker's work maybe 5 years ago was one of those points where it was like, I learned something where it stuck with me. I was like, so her whole thing that I'm studying Black teachers and Black pedagogy prior to Brown gave me this aha of like, well, everything wasn't broken down necessarily. Wait a second. She done cataloged all this, what I've come to call Black educational capital. Right. Like it was building up until Brown. And then we treat that as if it was just lost jobs. Like we just fired teachers, but we don't talk about we fired a pedagogy. We fired a body of knowledge and information. Right. And my thing is, OK, well, if I'm right about that, I'm true, I'm reading it the right way, then the goal is to rebuild Black educational capital. Right. Yeah. That we lost. Right. Because we lost it. We could go back and get it, or we could renew it. You are developing. You are contributing to that. You're contributing to what we can own ourselves. But the question is, and it takes me a while to get to the question in the comments. I saw somebody put like ask him about Dr. West and HBCUs. And this is my question really is, can we really build up Black educational capital if we're doing it in other people's houses? Why wouldn't Dr. West be at an HBCU? Why is Ivy League a draw and an attraction for us?
Yeah, I've been asked this question a bunch of times. And it's always an interesting proposition. Like, here's the thing. Like, I believe that HBCUs are our guiding star. I believe that those are the institutions where young folks can enter into and really make sense of who they authentically are and be able to sort of navigate the world with a full recognition of their Blackness. I also want to be clear that HBCUs, in some instances, are also spaces where Black folks learn that only certain Black folks have value, that only certain Black folks are respected, and that if you're here, you're it, and all the rest of them are the mother Negro. I don't want us to believe that HBCUs on their own are this place of ultimate Black democracy and freedom. In many ways, they serve to recreate certain hierarchies. Now, should we create HBCUs that are about the welcoming of all Black folks? And the reality is, yes. And the honest part is that we ain't there yet.
Yeah. So what you're basically saying is don't over romanticize what that is. Yeah,
HBCUs are dope. HBCUs as they stand are not the answer, because HBCUs as they stand in many instances oftentimes replicate this notion that only certain versions of Blackness have value and others don't. And HBCUs need a academic identity and framework more than anybody else. Because listen, there's a lot of house Negro shit going on in HBCUs. Now,
what?
There is.
Shots fired.
Now, let's also talk about the Ivy League piece. The Ivy Leagues are not the answer. They're not the ultimate desire.
This is the system. All the systems are trash. Go ahead, keep going.
Yeah. Thank you. This is what I'm just trying to tell y'all. Like the Ivy, like everybody trash, beloved. Like I'm not here trying to say that that's better than. I'm just saying let's be critical of all of us. Let's be critical of all our positioning so we can articulate how to function within the spaces that we're in to be better for the whole thing. Like I'm in an Ivy League institution. Would I go to HBCU? Yeah, they gave me the position I deserve and the bread I need to be able to sustain my family. I'd be there in a heartbeat. Shout out to whoever it is, call me in. But no, here's the thing. Them folks also don't want me neither. Let's be clear.
Really? Oh, wow.
Oh,
really?
hell yeah.
Really?
You think certain HBCUs want black folks to enter into those spaces to say to them, yo, y'all done drunk the Kool-Aid? I got a chapter in Ratchetdemic that talks about the Oreo cookie, probably one of the most poisonous snacks anyone can ever consume. Absolutely. The white on the Oreo cookie is made of titanium dioxide, which has been identified by the British version of the CDC as a carcinogenic. And so you have white filling of an Oreo. The Oreo don't stand on its own. The white filling don't stand on its own. The white filling of the Oreo requires brown cookies to hold it up.
This is the craziest, dopest thing that's probably ever been said on this show ever.
If there were no brown cookies holding it up, the white filling of the Oreo couldn't sell.
Yeah, damn.
And let's be clear, the brown cookies holding up white filling don't only exist in white spaces.
Okay, well, let me ask this though, because this is the dopest thing I've ever heard.
I didn't ride on the Ivy League yet.
Yeah,
the Ivy League institutions have these credentials. I'm sorry, I'm gonna make it quick.
They
also are superficial. They have they are. Look, the Ivy League is a brand name.
Mm-hmm.
It's like wearing Ralph Lauren or Calvin Klein. You know what I mean? Like it's a brand name of a broken version of a system. Now, here's my thing. I function within that system to be able to ensure that system bends towards the needs of black folks. Folks will be like, why Dr. Emdin is in Columbia? Why you got to be at Columbia? Because if I'm not at Columbia,
no one is. Yeah, no one is.
Ain't nobody in there going to be doing it the way it's supposed to be done and articulating and pushing. Don't get it. Like, I'm not utilizing my tenure at Columbia as like, I'm professor, look at me. I'm now like, yo, y'all done gave me tenure. Let's reimagine this whole joint. That's probably why they ain't give me full yet. and so I'm going to go into where I go to tell the truth. But let's be honest, beloved. You know what I mean? Like, don't over romanticize where we are. Let's be clear that within Ivy League institutions and within HBCUs, there are folks doing work, pushing boundaries, going to the next level of the work. And the thing is that we have to allow folks in multiple spaces to be able to get it done. We need Professor Cornel West in the Ivy League institution. Because we need him in his rawness, in his love for black folks, in his freedom-mindedness in those spaces to push them to be the best versions of themselves for black folks. And I'm not saying that's what we should all pursue, but if that's where he is and that's his platform, give him the space to utilize that platform to be able to create those best opportunity and let the folks in the HBCUs do the work they need to do as well. But it ain't about location. It's about the collective destination, which is freedom.
I feel like this is the honest assessment that we need. And I feel like you just indicted me because I am a part of the romantics. I am part of the ones that romanticize. So like when I see the situation with Nicole Hannah-Jones, my first thought was, okay, well, they did what they do. Like, that's what they do. I don't understand why Morehouse, Spelman, or Howard don't show up with a better offer and be like, you could add all that cachet to our organization, right? To us. And what you just said too is there's some work for them to be better anyways internally, right? For them to do some work to be better. But maybe that's a better ground. What I've heard about institutions like the one where you're at is that there's a surveillance feeling, a feeling like you're always like you can't let your hair down oftentimes, like you're under watch or whatnot. That might not be there if you were at a HBCU, but that I could be wrong about that.
No, I think that, listen, I also would say that, black folks around black folks, it's a level of freedom that is just about, that's just different. It just feels different. Like when I'm at, a fancy schmancy party, or I'm in the hood at a barbecue, the barbecue just feel different, right? So I think there is something to be said for black folks being around black folks and a certain kind of freedom it feels. But check this out: I'm black in America. I'm under constant surveillance.
Mm-hmm.
And so not to say that I've grown accustomed to the trauma of surveillance, but it's that I've become equipped in navigating a world that surveils my existence.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And it's at the point now where I'm not particularly harmed by it. I'm simply aware of it. And I've constructed tools to help me to navigate that so that I can get my folks to freedom. You know what I'm saying? And again, part of that articulation of how I navigate in a world where I'm consistently surveilled is to operate in my full ratchetdemic self. Mm-hmm. Right? It's to be ratchetdemic is to move beyond imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like, I now can exist in the space where I need to be as my full self, knowing that I hold the credential, so you can't kick me out on credential. I'm just as smart as y'all. I'm publishing papers, I'm publishing books, and my teaching credentials is on point. But yet I have something that y'all ain't got. And so because of that, I can almost leverage myself a bit beyond the surveillance. In fact, what I've learned to do is to turn the eye of the camera that surveils back on those, right, who have tried to use that as a mechanism to keep me as less than, right? So I'm like, okay, we have the same credentials, but when was the last time you really worked within communities that you say you advocate for? Wow, you have this really nice social justice statement. What have you done as an institution about it? So it's almost like turning the eye that makes you feel less than back on them and changing the assessments of what it means to be fully actualized and whole. You know, how do you turn the eye back on the institution and force it to live up to the statements it makes about freedom and justice and equity?
Wow.
And so, you know, that's how I've been able to get around the surveillance of existing in white spaces.
Sharif, are you a ratchetdemic?
Listen, when I look at it, you know, as Dr. Emdin was speaking, I look at it as, you know, my last 11 years were in a charter network that was, you know, white led, and folks were like, hey, when are you going to do, you know what I mean? Like, it's interesting, like people sometimes on the sidelines would tell, you know, want to kind of tell me how to educate, you know, where to educate and things like that. I'm like, did you start a school for me to come to? And they're like, no. Like, okay, well, you got a lot of like pointing and direction. Like, you know, you can't be just a coxswain on the crew team. You got to do the rowing as well, right? And I would also find that there were a lot of folks who thought they were doing something and want to try to out-black you. Like, well, if you're really black, you'll be here. Or like, first of all, you're not going to out-black me. You know, just my family alone means that's the trump card. I ain't got to deal with that, because how I was raised, how I was brought up, how I saw kids being taught, and how I'm trying to replicate that. No. And if I had the funds, and I've been on record saying this, I would make 100 Nithamusasas, 1,000 Nithamusasas, right? But at the end of the day, it was also Black children in the neighborhood that I grew up, and that's where I was gonna serve. And so this idea of rising above the constraints, and when I say constraints, I'm talking about any constraints, right? You know, when I was reading Up South, that talked about Philadelphia, which was like unique because of the number of so-called free Black folks in this space, that some of them started raising their noses and talking down to the recent migrants of Black folks coming from the Deep South, right? And how they wanted to create this space of bubble, like, well, our home was featured in the local newspaper, and look at the ghetto of these new folks coming in, not reaching down like, hey, it's more of us now, let's do this to change the city. It was almost like, oh no, we're closer to white than we are to you. That's right. As a new person being Black. And to me, that seeps, you know, perniciously through our educational systems as well, right? We have a whole lot of middle-class Black folks who are teaching poor Black kids, and they want to use a different paradigm than what should be centered. And so this idea of ratchetdemics and rising above whatever constraints, imaginary, self-imposed, institutional, rising above that and keeping that collective destination of freedom on the mind and doing the work. And instead of the dumb politics of, well, I'm more Black than you. No, you're not. There's a whole lot of ways to be Black. No, you're not.
Are you having a black off?
This is so key, y'all.
You know,
like we have to find the words to articulate that phenomenon that Brother Reef said, because that's the issue we have, y'all. It's the conversation I was having about the HBCU. Like it's the replication of oppression. Frantz Fanon is so real that the oppressed, once they have an inkling of power, the only thing they know how to do is replicate the oppression that they experience themselves and who they see as less than. And I think that's
our best teacher sometimes.
That's the piece that we need to work on collectively. That I think historically we've not really gone there yet. I think historically we've talked about a lot of layers, but historically we've not really spent the time to talk about what it feels like to be a Black person who's come up, feel like you got something. You're like, yo, look how them white folks did me. Let me find who I could do it to. And I think it's that piece, right? And I think that's what we need to bring to schools, right? Which is what it sounds like you had in that experience when you were going up to school, Brother Reef. Like, it's like, yo, we are all collectively brilliant and beautiful and Black and powerful, rather than look for what divides us. And I think the things that divide us are important. So it's important to be critical with love. Like, if I love you, I have to be critical of you. Like, love is about high expectations. Like, I always use this example. Like, if you're with, like, when you know, back in the days when you was like younger and you just dating, you're like, you can do what you do, I can do what I do. You know what I mean? We'll get up when we get up. Like, that's just the nature of how that went down. Once you find yourself with somebody you want to devote to, love is about high expectations. Like, I love you enough to expect you not to see anybody else. Right? I love you enough that these are the demands I have of how I want to feel. So for me, love is about high expectations. If I don't have any expectations of you, it means I don't love you at all. Do you? Now, love being high expectations means then that we must critique ourselves on folks who take on these class dynamics when it comes to Black freedom.
Okay. Now this is, before we run short too, I need your help on this exact point that you just made, because this is actually something personal to me. Is like, how do you hold high accountability for your people and critique within love, not critique from a place of hating and beefing, or the crab in the bucket thing, or I just don't like what you're ascending to or whatnot. But there's points at which we can say, I disagree with you on that thing. That's easy. That's simple. Like, we just disagree. There's a point at which you might be saying or doing something where I think it's starting to fall into territory that is seriously damaging for our people, or it's damaging for our social progress. Like, how do you critique Ben Carson with love, for instance, or Thomas with love? Right. Yeah.
I don't always get it right. And I'll be upfront about this, because, I'm also hip hop, right? So after the battle, I'll dap you up. But while we battling, we getting at it. You understand what I'm saying? And I feel it's that like in a Silk Sonic-esque kind of way, right? It's like, you gotta leave the door open a little bit after the battle. You know what I'm saying? Like, for me, it's like, I haven't always gotten this right. And when I say I haven't gotten it right, is that I'm like, yo, you tripping, you wilding, you this. But I will always say, yo, but if you want to build, I'm here to build with you on it. What oftentimes happens is folks don't want to build afterwards because they're getting their feelings. Like, for me, folks will say things that they disagree with me on, and we cool with that. But I'm like, so can we build on it? Nah, I just want to be mad and we done. I'm like, all right. Like, for me, it's like, do we create the space after the critique to be able to circle back with love? Or do we open with love, have the critique, and end with love? And I think in a 140 character world with internet sound bites, folks are not interested in nuance. Right? It's like, people are just interested in the hot takes. And I think we as a people have to understand that after the hot take, publicly extend the love. That's the other part too. Don't hate on me in public and love me on the low.
Yeah. I mean, and there's levels to this too, though. Like, I just want to be real. Like, in your level of things, I've disagreed with some things that you have said, but I didn't put it in the category of damaging for our people. You get further down the line to a Candace Owens. I don't know how we open the door to build.
There ain't no space there. I'm sorry. Right. Yeah. I think you're right. I think you're right, Chris. Like, I think you're absolutely right. I think at the point where it becomes that your position is about ensuring that a white supremacist lens is what Black folks are viewed as, then that's not critique, right? That's right. Like, you're assaulting. It's not a critique. It's like, stop killing us.
That's right.
I think when they're different perspectives, like, there are folks I've had issues with who I feel like deep in their hearts probably are not evil. Right. But I gotta let you know,
you said probably not evil.
Like, you're not evil. Like,
there's a chance that you're not the devil.
You're not the devil, but you're an asshole, bro. You really tripping, and you acting like you got the answers, and you really are not informed. But I don't think you're evil. You know what I mean? Like, I'll open up space to be able to engage. But most folks. Here's the thing. I'll say this, and I'll end here on this topic at least. People who don't have a ground to stand on do not open up space for debate or critique, because if you debate or critique, it exposes deficiencies in the intellectual work that's required to hold the position that you have. Like, there have been issues in the contemporary that have emerged that I've been I don't know if people notice, like, certain shit, I'm like, yo, Why is Chris Emdin not saying anything about, like, folks, like, people have asked me, Dr. Emdin, you've not said anything about blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yo, fam, I'm not being silent. Silence is violence, but I'm being still. And I'm being still because I'm not informed enough to hold a position. So when you hear me talking about shit, like when I'm getting in my bag, trust me, it's because I've read, I've experienced, I've worked, I'm confident enough to articulate my perspective. But if I don't know, I'm gonna just the fuck up. And I think that more of us need to learn to not hold a position on something you're not informed in, because that's when you don't like critique, because critique exposes that you've not done the work to hold the position. And it's okay not to know everything about everything. You know, I'm the first, like, I don't know nothing about, like, I'd be a real outright example, and people will call me ignorant. The contemporary issue going on with Israel and Palestine, I know fundamentally bombing good people is wrong. I know for a fact that violence against people who've historically been pushed to the margins is wrong. So I could get out loud and be like, yo, that's wrong. I could do that. And I would, but I wasn't well read. I could hold a public moral position because morally it's wrong, but I'm not well read enough to understand each and every nuance. And so because of that, while I could say that's wrong, I am not going to be like, here's my Instagram message, because that's dumb. And it's okay to not know. And our people need to learn that it's okay to not know. And it's okay to say, I need to learn more first. I have a fundamental moral position, but I need a more informed position. And when you do that, then you're open for critique because you've thought fully about your perspective.
I mean, I think this goes back to, you know, one of the things my mom used to tell her students was, be careful not to make your oppressor your best teacher. Like, don't learn the best from the person that hated you the most, right? And that speaks to not only how we treat other folks, you know, particularly our own people, but also when to be quiet, right? Like, the person that makes the biggest mistakes is the one that talks the most, right? Because I think there's you know, that's something that's learned from the oppressor who feels that they are experts on everything, including things like the double CRT, whether it's culture responsive teaching or critical race theory. They think they're experts on CRT and they've not read a single thing. They've not experienced a single thing. So they can't shut the hell up and listen to other people's lived experiences, reflect on their own construction of frameworks and paradigms and institutions, and look at their own research that talks about, oh, this marginalized some and elevates others. Like, this is their own, we already know, but their own research talks about this, about how their positional power has been so established based off of their subjugation of other people, their genocidal tendencies towards other people. If you can't shut up and just sit and reflect on them, like, okay, if that happened 400 years ago, okay, where's the line of demarcation where it stopped?
Give me the date.
Yeah, give me the date. Show me the line. Because, right, we know from physics, stuff don't stop until something stops it. Right? So when did this become this, you know, immovable object then, and how does it manifest in today's world, in today's children? Right. And if you can't do that, right? So when the FBI said, yo, KKK is coming in the police force, we knew that. We didn't need your research to tell us that. And guess what? The police force ain't big enough to hold all the white violent races. Police force ain't big enough. Philly police force 6,000 across the country. It ain't big enough. So where else do they go? They sit on benches and they're in state houses and a whole bunch of other places. Right?
And to be real, they're in classrooms.
And they're in
schools, districts, and classrooms. And adjacent to classrooms, right? We talked about this before. If ignorant white mamas in the suburbs will attack Arnie Duncan, one of their people, for saying like, yo, y'all out of pocket, imagine what they'll do to say when someone says, yo, black kids are human beings. And we should actually teach real history to them and not lie to them. You know, the way Baldwin says that a child cannot afford to be lied to. Don't despise them when you teach them. We know that happens based off of the data, the research, and our lived experiences, collectively and individually. And we also know that they are lied to incessantly. And now they want to create laws to continue to triple down, not be humble enough to be like, hey, how do we do it? But no, let's triple down. Let's fine them 5,000 if they tell the truth. Let's decertify them if they tell the truth. Let's withhold money from this district if they tell. Like, come on.
Well, we know that like the simplest recipe of all of this is whenever there's a move like that, the move is only about power. So you only have to ever ask one question: how does this give them power?
Yep.
Because if you ask that question, it'll lead you to why they're doing it, and it'll tell you why it's being done, and it'll give you insight into what you need to do for yourself after that. Oh, okay, this is how that gives them power. If you can control the way people think and the way people are taught, especially from kindergarten on, you can actually train up the people that you need to oppress in the future, right? So I think our educators need to be seeing themselves the way that Vanessa Siddle Walker, Black educators that she studied, saw themselves, which is they are deconstructing a thing for kids in private. It's a private conspiracy. Education is a private conspiracy to create a new group of people who won't be oppressed, right? It's a private conspiracy. You don't have to be out on Front Street. But Brown actually took the veil off and the curtain off of it, ironically, because the devil likes to do this to Black people oftentimes, which is, give you a piece of cake and slap you in the face, right? So 1954 was supposed to solve everything for us. And what it did was it pulled the veil off of the Black pedagogy that had been taking place all the way up until that point.
It just reveals it. It just
revealed it. Yeah.
I love when you said a private conspiracy. And I would say a private conspiracy getting manifested through public curriculum and pedagogy.
Yes.
That's the ill part. It's a private conspiracy to undermine Blackness manifested through curriculum and pedagogy. And I want us to understand this, like Brother Reef, like you were so spot on. Like curriculum is a lie. These things, like the standards are a lie, a falsity. Like the very thing that we utilize as the benchmark from which we assess what is good teaching, what is not, what young folks could be held on to. Those things themselves are tainted through the lens of seeing Blackness as problematic. So when the entire infrastructure, think about it this way, like your vision is clouded. Like you can't even see straight. And so I always tell folks, like, you cannot know what's going on in a place until you do the work to clear what's happening in the space. Right? If you don't clear the stuff in the ether that's not seen, it'll manifest in the place. You're like, why are these kids not learning? Why is this not happening? Why are the teachers all the things that you're saying, like in this place, learning's not happening because we've not cleared the psychic and emotional and historical space. And this is the CRT clears space. Like sometimes we need a little bit of what I call a pedagogical sage. When folks put sage in the air, the indigenous, the sage is supposed to clear the evil spirits. Now check this out. The sage clearing the spirits is perceived to be it's almost like an indigenous practice that is relegated to the spiritual. However, biologists have identified that literally when you're burning sage, there are chemicals in the sage that through the burning, the combustion, creates certain things that go into the air that kills bacteria. So now we have a spiritual phenomenon that we find out has biological justification. And in the classroom, there needs to be a pedagogical sage. There's got to be an approach to teaching and learning that clears the evil spirits of times past, that obscured our vision from seeing the wholeness of young people. And until there's something clear in that space, everything that happens in the place is problematic. People ask all the time, why? Nowadays we do all this. You ever go into a talk and they do a land acknowledgement?
Yes.
So land acknowledgements to the indigenous. The land acknowledgements were constructed not just so you could be like, I acknowledge the indigenous. Now we go on. The psychology, the reason why the land acknowledgements come to play is because somehow there's a recognition that I have to apologize to people who own this land that I stand upon. That is about clearing the space to ask for apology from the indigenous, because that means that you have to recognize that there are spirits of those. I don't know if I'm going too deep for y'all. There are spirits of the ancestors in that place that you have to do the land acknowledgement for, to honor them, because if you don't do that in that space, they're gonna haunt the space. When Harpo was like, ain't no good gonna come to you. There's a curse, if I may go there with y'all. There's a curse inside the environment that will still remain there unless you do the work to clear that thing out the space. And so we are having conversations through a Eurocentric and institutional framework around place and robbing ourselves of the vision to understand the spiritual and social emotional dynamics of the space. And no matter what you do in the place, fund it, train speakers, give them iPads. If the space ain't cleared, the outcome's gonna remain the same. So you better go burn some pedagogical sage.
I had to use the academic version of what you're saying. I had to use the John instead of sage. I had to use
that was lit, by the way.
John Witherspoon. You got to clear the room, clear the space. Now I know we got to run. We're never gonna have enough time with you, and we're wrapping up.
Got to come back,
but you got to come back. But now I just got one question for you though. After you said all that, just if we could quickly, like, if I could ask you this, because everything you just said, like from the standards, the way the thing is built, the structure of the thing, the context that we put kids in terms of education and public education, all of it, if you do use a CRT lens, there's no way to come away without seeing that it is a serious system of racism. It's a white supremacist system from top to bottom. The way that we form districts and boundaries and assign people to those schools and assign teachers and which teachers get in which classrooms and how they get there and what they get taught on their way to getting there and how they're evaluated and how we judge whether a lesson lands or whatnot. There's probably even the food that we feed them, there's probably no part of the institution that actually isn't a starter prison, that actually isn't an intellectual starter prison, right? And then when I hear folks like you saying, and I'm not saying you personally, but when I'm talking about my intellectual class of educated Black folks, and then people will say, but we should double down on the public education system. And for me, the difference between civil rights and abolition is that civil rights believes that the system and the Constitution is basically good, and with some tweaks, it can be made great for us. Abolition starts from the premise of the system's not good. There's no such thing as slavery reform. Like, so if you're going to be an abolitionist in education, you have to start with, no, the system actually is not good. Yeah. It's not good.
Bro, I agree with you. Here's the thing. Here's my stance. And some may say it's I've been called perpetually optimistic, even as I describe what is problematic. I truly believe that the answer to the issues that plague the system is I'm a teacher. This is first things first. I believe in the transformative power and potential of good teachers. I believe that a good teacher in one academic year with a young person can transform the life of a young person so drastically, so vastly, that they can go through traumatic situations year after year, and that teacher that sets the kid's soul on fire can overcome all that. And this is why, for me, in any school, even in a public school, my work is about training teachers to understand the type of pedagogy that sets a young person's soul on fire. Because once a soul is ignited, it burns through the chaff. And so like the anchor of my work, I get pulled into the public intellectual space. I've turned down like news stuff with folks, all sorts of stuff, because at the core of it, I believe in the transformative power of a good teacher with good pedagogy in a classroom. And I feel like that in my TED Talk, we can teach teachers how to create magic. And if you teach enough teachers to create magic, we can overcome the system. This is not to say that these schools are not bad or broken. This is not to say the system is not. I want us to recognize that it's broken. And I want to, because of that, empower teachers to be able to set a soul on fire. And once a soul is set on fire, the world changes. And I fully believe in that.
I love it. That's a great answer. I love it. Sharif, what's your final words, brother?
First of all, man, thanks for coming, Dr. Emdin. I can't wait till you come back. Every time, share space with you. It's been, personally, professionally, igniting, so to speak. And I'm constantly bringing my own fire, while I have this calm demeanor, I'm always having this, I'm a seething cauldron of conflict. Like internally, it's always on. It's always on go, right? Like that's just how we were raised as youth in our school. Like, no, listen. The oppressor is out there and you're part of this community, and your job is to wage battle in whatever space you find yourselves, right? And so to be able to do that, but and also just to end, just share, when I was really reflecting of like what was my next chapter, and I love being a principal, because everything you said about educators and teachers. You know, I believe that to my core. Like I think every prophet was a teacher. You know, they were shepherds, but they were teachers. You know, they were carpenters, but they were teachers. The essence, the spiritual essence of what it means to teach, I think that is, you know, God's work, because God throughout time has sent teachers to guide masses who were ignorant, who were enslaved, who were oppressed, right? Like, and so for me, there's a spiritual connection. When you talk about like the sage, I love that, because it's not just the sage of the incense, it's the sage of the person who's doing the righteous work, right? And so it's a double meaning to the sage. And so I love that, you know, that aspect of it. But when I was figuring out, like, what's my next chapter, where can I do the most damage to the system as a principal with these 800 students and their orbits, right? Because the power of a teacher is not just the child in front of you. It's also their grandchildren that you will impact, but it's also the other folks who you don't teach, but is in that student's orbit, right? Because that student carries on and says, nah, what, you don't internalize that. Here's what my teacher taught me, or here's what my principal shared with me. Here's what the educators experience, right? And so it's the student, is the student's orbit, and it's the student's grandkids, right? This compounded impact of effective teaching. So it's hard for me to lead a principalship. But you were one of the few, a handful, you know, family and outside of family, a handful of folks. I was just like, should I, you know, leave at this moment, you know, to really support and build a Black teacher pipeline? We were in Kansas City. And, you know, you pulled me to the side. We were standing by the wall, and, you know, and it was like, oh, folks were out playing baseball, but I went in to like actually get some insight, you know, to soothe my soul for this move that I was thinking about doing. And I just want to thank you for those words of wisdom then, as well as the words of wisdom today. And just appreciate you, man.
Oh, bro.
I appreciate you too. And you have a standing offer to keep coming back, because every Friday we are trying to have a little bit of school here, which is actually really trying to have conversations that matter with folks. This one definitely is one of my favorites ever, because I got to answer a lot of my questions. I got to ask a lot of my questions that I have from somebody that I think can answer them. And I think this has been amazing. For people watching, this has been another Freedom Friday, and you are still not free, but hopefully you're freer after this conversation we had today. Our guest today was Dr. Chris Emdin, who's Associate Professor in the Department of Mathematics, Science, and Technology at Teachers College in Columbia. More than that, he is also the author of the book for white teachers that teach in the hood, and some of the rest of y'all too. And I probably would change the title to be a lot of the rest of y'all too. And I'm sure some of you have either read that book or lied about it, but there's another book coming soon, and I'm putting up on the screen here. This time I didn't pull it from the Amazon, because authors sometimes get mad at me for using the Amazon page. So here's the book, Ratchetdemic from the Beacon Press, and you can find, if you just Google it, you'll find this new book. Get online to get the pre-order. And we will have a book club in the future if we get enough people, like, you know, reading this book together, and we can learn together in peace. We can learn together in peace. Appreciate it. Appreciate you, Dr. Emdin.
I appreciate you too, man. I'll can I just say this, Brother Reeve? I cannot hear those kind words and not give them back. You are truth. You are light. You're such a powerful and important voice, not just what you do professionally, but even what you do as a father and as a role model. And I'm deeply thankful that our paths have crossed. There's never been an instance where I share space with you that I don't leave inspired and motivated. So I just want to give that to you, brother. And, you know, Brother Chris, you know, we've engaged on the digital platforms a couple of times. But I see where your heart is. And I know that it's really about our people, and it's about freedom, and it's about pushing boundaries however you see fit. And I'm thankful that we have you in this space to push us, to lead us, and to guide us. And so to you both, thank you so much for sharing space with me. I always close with this. If there's anything I've said has offended, I take full responsibility for. It's me. I'll own that. If anything I've said that is inspired, that's motivated, no, it's not me. It's the ancestors that flow through me. And I hope y'all go out there and cop Ratchetdemic. And I can't wait to be back soon and build with you guys.
Love it.
And when will it be out? It's on pre-order.
It's on pre-order right now. The actual date is August 10th. Those pre-order numbers matter because it helps the book standing and stuff. But I poured my soul into this joint, man. So I really hope folks pick it up. But yeah, August 10th is the date. Pre-order is now. You will have it on August 10th if you order now. Again, thank y'all for the love, truly.
And let's make that the next date, if not before then. August 10th is a Tuesday, And so maybe August 13th, and Black August, coming back during Black August and talk specifically about the book. And that's a day before my father's birthday, and a whole lot of stuff was going on in Black August.
It's done.
I would love it.
That's locked in. That's in the calendar. Then let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody listening and watching, pre-order the book. Dr. Emdin, is there a preferred way that you have for people to do that, though?
There's a bunch of indie bookstores that also hold a pre-order. So if you go to independentbookstores.com, I believe, or even go to beaconpress.com on their website for the actual publisher, you can pre-order there.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Appreciate you. Have a great weekend. Have a great long weekend for everybody. Get some rest. Yes, get some rest and remember yourself. Come back next